It's astonishing how voices, that art voice, for example, can imprint themselves on us, can reach places that images can't. I came to love Jonathan's voice long before I knew his name. I was an adolescent, young teenager, I guess, living in Utica, New York, and had become obsessed with the Vietnam War, obsessed with Watergate, the grand procession of Watergate. I obsessively watched the Watergate hearings to the extent that my parents would essentially say, "Go out and play." And I began to worry about me. One night, my father took me to the Utica Public Library, hoping to distract me. And I found on the great reading table in the great hall of the library a single copy of The New Yorker, a magazine I had never heard of. And I read, I'm astonished to say, that piece, I guess it was 69, that Wally read before on the silent majority. At the time, it didn't occur to me that a single writer had written this. It seemed like somehow the voice of God. It was an astonishing piece. It opened my eyes, and its clarity electrified me. The clear-eyed vision of it. The idea that you could simply look at things hard enough and with a sensible, determined, patriotic, mildly indignant gaze come to understand it and tell others about it, tell others how to understand it. It was only much later that I learned that this was a particular writer. His name was Jonathan Schell, and I began to read him. And only much later that I really realized that the comments, when I came to the New Yorker myself, that the comments actually were written by individual writers. Jonathan did his work armed with the newspaper, the Constitution, and his own two eyes. And I've realized that, the marvel of that, only much later when I tried to become a writer myself. The own two eyes part is what fascinates me. There is a voluptuous pleasure, I think, in being a reporter. And the voluptuous pleasure comes in knowing that when you're far away from events, you can be certain about them. You can understand them completely. Ideology can guide you. And then when you land in a particular complicated, violent, contradictory, messed up place, suddenly all is darkness. You're inundated by a blizzard of sense impressions. And suddenly you know nothing. And that is a gorgeous moment, immensely enjoyable moment. And I know from reading Jonathan's early work in particular that he knew the voluptuousness of that moment, of knowing nothing and realizing that what he had to do was to go out and see things for himself and record as clearly as possible what he had seen. And the difficulty of this, I think, cannot be exaggerated. Reporters move, like most people, move in packs. Reporters tell one another what they're seeing, what they've seen, what should be seen. We all tell one another how to see the world. To actually see it yourself uniquely is a triumph of purpose and a triumph of the will, I think. I'm going to read a passage from The Village of Binsuk, the last paragraph of which Tom Engelhardt read, because I think it exemplifies his method. And when you say method, you're talking about something that came in some way from deep in his soul, because this is a 24-year-old man, a young man, who has never written, this is his first published piece. Astonishing thing, I think. Let me read this. This is from the first third of the article. It's a scene, well, the village has been cleared. It's going to be destroyed, as you heard in the passage that Tom Engelhardt read, but in this passage, the village is being cleared, which means that the villagers are being taken away to a camp that's been constructed for them. Jonathan has arrived on a helicopter, and he is sitting on the outskirts of the village with several soldiers who are simply sitting by the side of a road. And I will read. The sky, which had been overcast, began to show streaks of blue, and a light wind stirred the trees. The bombing, the machine gunning from helicopters, the shelling, and the rocket firing continued steadily. Suddenly, a Vietnamese man on a bicycle appeared, pedaling rapidly along the road from the direction of the village. He was wearing the collarless, pajama-like black garment that is both the customary dress of the Vietnamese peasant and the uniform of the National Liberation Front. And although he was riding away from the center of the village, a move forbidden by the voices from the helicopters, he had, it appeared, already run a long gauntlet of American soldiers without being stopped. But when he had ridden about 20 yards past the point where he first came in sight, there was a burst of machine gun fire from a copse 30 yards in front of him, joined immediately by a burst from a vegetable field to one side, and he was hurled off his bicycle into a ditch a yard from the road. The bicycle crashed into a side embankment. The man with the Minolta camera, who had done the firing from the vegetable patch, stood up after about a minute and walked over to the ditch, followed by one of the engineers. The Vietnamese in the ditch appeared to be about 20, and he lay on his side without moving, blood flowing from his face, which, with the eyes open, was half buried in the dirt at the bottom of the ditch. The engineer leaned down, felt the man's wrist, and said, "He's dead." The two men, both companions of mine on helicopter number 47, stood still for a while with folded arms and stared down at the dead man's face, as though they were giving him a chance to say something. Then the engineer said with a tone of finality, "That's a VC for you. He's a VC, all right. That's what they wear. He was leaving town. He had to have some reason." The two men walked back to a ridge in the vegetable field and sat down on it, looking off into the distance in a puzzled way, no longer bothering to keep low. The man who had fired spoke suddenly, as though coming out of deep thought. "I saw this guy coming down the road on a bicycle," he said, "and I thought, is this it? Do I shoot? Then some guy over there in the bushes opened up, so I cut loose." The engineer raised his eyes in the manner of someone who has made a strange discovery and said, "I'm not worried. That's the first time I've ever seen a dead guy, and I don't feel bad. I just don't, that's all." Then, with a hard edge of defiance in his voice, he added, "Actually, I'm glad. I'm glad we killed the little VC." I'd say this is a very simple passage. It consists purely of description and the recording of dialogue. But it does something very complicated. It shows you that this is a murder. It shows you without telling you. It makes no case for itself. It argues no editorial point. But it does something, the only writer I've ever seen do this, actually, is Tolstoy. The critic Victor Schlossky called this ostronia, or estrangement. That is, you describe everyday things in an absolutely blank, absolutely clear, absolutely mechanical way, and in so doing you show the undercurrent, what's really going on. And in doing this, Jonathan shows us not only a particular murder, a quiet murder, an unrecorded murder, something that no one will ever talk about or know about. He shows us the impossibility, as he does in this entire piece, the impossibility of this particular war, the fact that it's going to fail. And it's very hard, I think, to read The Village of Ben Suk and not come away with the impression conveyed to us by 24-year-old Jonathan Schell that the war is going to fail, that the war is doomed. Jonathan, it seems to me, was an American Jeremiah. He had a prophetic streak in him. He had a patriotic streak in him that was very, very strong. And he had a streak of humanism that told him, mixed with patriotism, that if you can just get people to see what's going on, what's really going on, if you can get through those 10 feet of lies somehow and reveal what's really happening, whether it's Vietnam or Iraq or with nuclear deterrence or war economy, or you name the subject, if you can just show them, they will act together to do the right thing. It's a deeply patriotic notion. It goes along the lines of reveal, then investigate, then expiate, then solve the problem. It was true about Watergate, and it's one of the reasons I think I was so captivated as a 12 and 13-year-old by Watergate, by the great American processional, the American Oresteia, the American coming to justice. The journalist revealed, the Congress investigated, and then the president resigned. People went to jail. We expiated what was wrong.